What's up YouTube? Back with another Cubase 10 video today. Going to be looking at the acoustic module in Groove Agent 5 and SE5 in a bit more depth today. Seeing just what it's capable of really with regards to programming in a drum and bass beat and with some kind of live feel as a starting point to layer with some single hits maybe in the next video when we look at the beat agent in a bit more depth. So to start out, I'm going to kind of compare the kits that come with the SE version in Cubase alongside the full counterparts in the full version. So what we're looking at here is the Studio SE kit, which anyone who has a version of Cubase that has Groove Agent SE4 or above will have access to. It's a bit more limited than the full Studio kit, which is this one here. Really, the limitations are the full one has 2 kicks, or I think it might be a different beater, and 2 different snare drums. Whereas the SE version only has 1. The other limitation is in the mixer here. You'll see in the SE version we've got everything grouped here, but there's no separate mics. In the full version here you've got the groups, but then you've got dual mics for your kick and snare. Each of the toms has got a separate mic, as do the cymbals and the percussion elements, which are essentially just claps, a tamb and a cowbell. You do have those elements on the SE kit, but you can't independently change volumes and things on the different percussion, cymbals and toms as just a group. We'll look at the new kit now that comes in Groove Agent 5 and SE5. It's called the Kit. I think this one's geared more towards kind of pop music. Doesn't have any percussion elements. Has the full version has an extra ride, an extra crash, and you also get different articulations for the snare and different beaters for the kick. And again, the extra routing as well, the extra channels for the kick and snare, and individuals for each tom. So we're going to start out with looking at the Studio SE kit. I'm just going to delete these other 4. We're not going to be using them, and they're just going to be chewing up my RAM. Especially the new one, it's really quite a hog. So first off, we're going to just program in a basic drum and bass pattern. This thing does have a style player, but I've got it loaded up without any patterns in here. It's all completely blank. This is just the initialized version of the kit. It does have some basic settings, which we'll probably tweak a little bit, but let's just get a pattern programmed in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a drum map from the instrument. I'm going to draw in a MIDI part here, close Groove Agent for a sec, and if we scroll down, everything should be labeled for us. Okay. So if you hold the Alt key when you're in the MIDI editor, it'll switch to the drumstick, and you can just draw in your MIDI here. Oh, on the wrong channel. We'll just draw in a basic 2-step pattern here. Going to turn up the velocity on our main hits. We're going to need a closed hat next, so I think this will do. And the way I program my hats in MIDI, I find it easier to do it this way. So I'll get 4 here. We'll bring the velocity down a little bit. And then I'll draw the next 4 in, usually on the channel above. And we'll bring the velocities down more on those ones. Change them a little bit just to kind of humanize it, and do the same with these as well. And then these middle ones here, I'm just going to turn snap to grid off and just drag these ever so slightly off the grid there, and then hit the down arrow and it'll bring it down to our hi-hat channel. And I'm going to grab all of this and Control D to duplicate, and making sure snap's back on, I'm just going to drag this first one back onto the grid, and let's see how that sounds. Okay, so just these velocities and moving some off the grid just humanizes it a little bit. It makes the hi-hats less robotic. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to move, just going to draw another one in here. And I'm going to move that up to an open hat. And then with this one, if we move that to a pedal, we can close it. I'm just going to expand this a little bit so we can see. Okay, yeah, that's the pedal. Okay, it makes the hats a little bit more interesting there. I think next we'll add some ghost snares, so maybe one here, two here, bring the velocities down. And we're just going to take these off the grid as well. Alright, it's adding a bit of interest. Let's get some percussion in there. We're kind of limited here, but let's maybe go for a worm break kind of vibe with a cowbell. Just going to put my first one in with snap on and turn it off now, and then just draw one in on each beat of this first bar, and just try to get them slightly off. This one's a bit too much. Okay, something like that. And then I'm going to bring the velocities of these all down so they just kind of hide a little bit behind the main drums. Maybe emphasize this third one a bit to add some groove. And then I'm going to grab these, duplicate it, make sure snap's on, and drag this first one back onto the grid here. Alright, very nice. Let's close that. I'm going to duplicate the MIDI clip now, and then glue those together. And then if I hit P on this, it'll loop again to the length of the MIDI event. And then we're just going to go in and maybe add a couple of extra kick drums. Maybe one here leading into the next loop with a bit less velocity, and maybe a double kick on the start of the third bar. Let's try that. Okay, and then we'll close it again, duplicate it again, glue it together again, and then maybe we'll add a crash on the beginning here. Okay. Okay, so now we've got our MIDI in there, we can get the instrument open, and let's actually see what some of the preset kits sound like in this SE kit. So it's going to go into the correct menu here. This is the one that anyone with a version of Cubase with Groove Agent SE4 will have access to. So you don't have to have Cubase 10 for this one. And I think there's a couple of pretty good ones in here for like a starting point. And if I load up the mixer, you'll see how every time I load a kit here, and it's not going to load in any patterns because I've got this option here switched off. So we could just drag this pattern that we've created down onto the pattern bank here, and you could then trigger this from Groove Agent. And then when we save a kit, you've got the MIDI clips that you've created saved there as well, and you can just make edits, or have one that you add a ride, something in there, alternate between with the cowbell, something like that. So the pattern library here can be useful even if you're not using the preset grooves. So let's go back to the instrument and see if we can kind of get this preset sounding a bit more drum and bassy. You got some basic envelopes here, tuning. You can change the amount that you're sending stuff to the room and overheads. The mixing options are a little more basic in this one. Eventually we'll probably switch over to the full studio kit and maybe take a look at the vintage kit as well. See if there are any better sounding ones in there. But we'll go through and we'll export a few different kits with this pattern that we can resample later or layer up with some stuff in the beat agent in the next video when we look at that. Okay, so we're just adjusting the kick there. Let's have a look at the snare. Tighten it up a bit with the envelope, and you do also have one in the mixer. We could maybe try layering a clap in there. Let's try it on the first couple bars, see how it sounds. It's like multiple claps. Let's have a look. I think you can switch them to single. Yeah. And the thing with using the claps as well as the cowbell in this one is we've got no independent control. So that's kind of where, you know, mixing and jumping over to the main studio kit now might be an idea. So let's open up the browser here, and we'll take a look. I think the other two kits we'll look at will be the studio kit and the vintage kit. The rock kit isn't particularly useful for our needs, and this one's a bit of a system hog, and it doesn't have a cowbell. And you know, I like the rides in this one, and sometimes, you know, I think it might be a good idea just to use the ride on a different beat agent, on a different acoustic agent, maybe over the top. That might be an idea. So let's try the studio kit first. Just get it cycling the whole clip again, and I think I'm going to take out those claps. Something we could try though is, even though you do have limited snares, you do have a rim shot version, which we could maybe try. Yeah, I'm not really feeling that. I mean, we could try moving them all up to the rim. Let's see. The round robin's just a little bit weird on the rim shot, so I don't tend to use it unless I'm going to resample it and just pick the best one. You have side sticks as well. For the purposes of this tutorial, I think we'll just stick with the standard snare articulation. Let's maybe check out a few more. Another place we could look as well is in these refills. Now these guys, they don't actually have kits, but they come with, I think it's 15 different pattern banks and mixer presets for the existing kits. So you've got SE versions and then ones that will use the full kits. So Let's try some of these. And yeah, this whole pack really, the mixer preset should be geared towards funk, which is what we're looking for. I mean, already these are sounding much nicer starting points than the ones that were available right off the bat, or the ones in the SE kit. Yeah, I'm liking some of the room settings and stuff on these ones. We could also try checking out maybe blues or jazz essentials. And this one I think's in the vintage kit. Yeah, so it's the same kind of deal. You get 2 snares, 2 different kick beaters, better mixing options, and I think more different layers of multi-sampling. But this kit isn't included at all in SE. This one and the rock kit are exclusive to the full version. Okay, let's maybe take a look at what's actually just in the vintage kit library. There should be some stuff geared for kind of reggae, punk, maybe like some ska and like classic rock in this kit, whereas the studio kit is more to funk, and you know, you can get more kind of hip-hop sounding breaks out of that one, but this one does have some pretty nice ones as well. See, that's a nice roomy one there. You know, if we start dialing back some of the envelopes and stuff on this one, we might be able to get quite a nice big sounding break. Let's have a look. to saturate the hats a little. Looks like there's already plenty on the overhead channel though. Let's maybe try, what have we got on here? Tape saturation. Let's have a look at the EQ. So it's kind of working in parallel there. And then what we could do here is just be recording on this track. So what I've got is a group track here that Groove Agent in the mix console's being routed to instead of the stereo out. And then this audio track has got an input from the drum group. So if we just hit record on this track here, okay, so we've got a whole one in there. And what you can do is just open the lanes here. And on this one, we'll just create tracks from lanes. And then delete the information from here. We can close the lanes up on that one now. This guy, I'm just going to turn off the input. And if we mute Groove Agent. This is what our drum break looks like. So, you know, you could resample it into the beat agent from there. But what I'm thinking is we'll capture a few different kits, process them a little differently. I'll maybe have a look at some of the effects that are built into here. We'll capture some loops here, and then I'll also touch on the style player and how that can be used to create edits and fills. So let's open up the browser again. Let's get this muted. Let's maybe see what's in the jazz pack. Yeah, no. Let's go back to this one. Yeah, not really feeling that snare. And I think it's because the bleed is on. We're getting that weird kind of... One thing I wish that you could do is control the round robin. I think no matter what the velocities are, it still kind of cycles round robin on kicks and snares, which is definitely not ideal. So yeah, just adjusting the reverb settings. Yeah, let's maybe record this one as well. Let's maybe beef it up with some tube compression. Definitely tightens it up a little bit. All right, let's record that one. Okay, we'll call this kit 2, kit 1. Meet this. And then, you know, you could even layer these up. So, I mean, there is, you know, you could get quite a good start going with this thing. Even if you were just gonna like high pass it and layer it up kind of as a live drum layer in place of a break. You can use the style player to really get some interesting grooves happening. And I think in part 2 on this acoustic agent, we'll touch on that a bit more. Especially with how you can create edits, because programming in edits in MIDI when you're talking about the placement of the toms, it's incredibly difficult to get a realistic edit, a drum fill programmed in MIDI compared to using the preset ones and just kind of copying over certain MIDI notes onto your own arrangement and changing like a snare here or there. So we'll go into that in the next video. I think that's all we're going to do for today. Just wanted to kind of go over, you know, programming beats in MIDI, some of the editing options in the acoustic agent, some of the options. Just before we go, let's have a quick look at, you know, the full options for effects. So you've got a lot of these, you know, same effects as in Cubase. So, you know, let's get rid of that. But reverbs, delays, EQs, and the names of these should all be pretty familiar to people who have Cubase. And one cool thing here, say we wanted to use the break that we have in there now, and but we don't really like the editing options within Groove Agent itself, because I mean it is kind of hard to EQ everything when you're working with these dials. I don't personally like using these very much, and the compressor's very basic. It doesn't really give you a lot of hands-on control or visualization of what you're doing. I know you're supposed to be doing it all by ear, but that kind of stuff does help, especially with EQing. You can see where you're scooping out frequencies. You can use it against your analyzer, but it's still not the same as using, say, frequency or something, which has fast become one of my favorite EQs. But the thing really to note here is there's a really cool feature that's in Groove Agent 5 and SE5 in Cubase 10. And say you wanted to export all of this to separate out, it would be an absolute nightmare. Look how many channels you've got. You've got 2 for the kick snare, you've got 4 toms, 5 cymbals, 3 percussion pieces, then the groups, and the room and the overheads. Imagine trying to set all of that up in the Cubase mixer. It would just take way too long. So what they've done, I think it's only part of the Acoustic Agent, and you can't do this with Beat Agent kits, but you can right click here and say export mixer and Fx to Cubase. And because all of these effects in the macro are basically just clones of the processors in the native channel strip in the editor here. So this is the new channel strip, and you can drag and drop these modules into different orders now. And you've got, they look a lot nicer for one thing, but with the compressors you can open up the full GUI for each kind of compressor. You've got, and I think it's the vintage compressor that is just called the compressor in Groove Agent. Yeah, it's the vintage compressor. So this is what we'll port over from any of the ones we have compressors, which I'll show you now. So what we're going to do is go into Groove Agent, right click on the kit here and say export mixer and Fx to Cubase. And then down in our mix console here, we've got all of those separate channels now, all the groups, and we've got full control over all of that. And then I'm just going to make sure these are muted. Okay. And then if we go into any one of these, let's go to the groups over here. This is all of the settings that have ported over from our channel strip within Groove Agent. So it's taken the EQ settings, but over here, you have a lot more control with the EQ. This is the channel strip EQ basically, so you can see what you're doing a lot more if you export it all into these different channels. And yeah, we'll touch on the style player and how you can use that in combination with our own MIDI here. So I'll just go ahead and save this project for the next video, and maybe I'll do that tomorrow. I'm going to try and eat some dinner. So yeah, we're going to call it a night, and we'll come back to this tomorrow and start using some fills from the pattern editor and kind of merging them in with our own groove here and creating some different edits, and do a little bit more processing inside of Cubase with some external VSTs. Alright, so yeah, that's it for another video. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments, hit like, subscribe. I'll be putting up a lot more Groove Agent and Cubase and Halion 6 content over the coming weeks. So yeah, hope this was informative, and yeah, I'll be back tomorrow with part 2 of the Acoustic Agent. Alright, peace.